Okay, Ethan, whenever are we ready? Okay, so welcome back, lecture 2. So we're going to talk about the state of nature. What is the state of nature? It's the external environment, right? So human beings, we're guided by our human nature, but most of our action doesn't take place in a vacuum. It takes place in the state of nature, which is the external environment. And I would like to talk about the external environment, the environment in which human beings act. Okay, so human beings, we enter society in its natural state, driven by, so we enter society, we are driven by scarcities. We can produce all the goods and the services that we can produce. We enter society driven by scarcity, and the most important scarcity is time. I think the only scarcity is time. We're going to find out. There are no other scarcities. The universe is ours to conquer. There's all kinds of resources on planet Earth in the universe, okay? The only resource is time and space. We can't be at two different places at the same time, and we are mortal, okay? So time is the fundamental scarcity that we have to deal with. So the entry into the marketplace is motivated, as we've seen, I'm just summarizing what we've seen so far, is motivated by our self-interest and the potential benefits of the division of labor, okay? So we enter society because of the division of labor and the benefits. Autarky is another word economists use. It means in isolation, autarky, right? Autarkic, ascetic life, you have sometimes Dominican Jesuit priests historically, they lived ascetic lives, self-sufficiency. They're often unsustainable. If you want to do it alone, it's hard, it's difficult, it's unsustainable. You're not going to multiply, right? Obviously, that's what necessitates our social interaction and entry into the market economy. So the human action in the state of nature manifests itself in two potential modes. So when the human beings, the naked ape, he can do it all alone, he's motivated by self-interest, he has goals he wants to achieve, he comes into society because it benefits him. When he gets into society, there are two forms of relationships. One of them is a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic is that my benefits depends on your benefits, right? It's an exchange environment. So by specialization, it is characterized peace, harmony, cooperation. We call this a market symbiosis or a market economy, okay? Or this naked ape could enter society and he has alternative thinking. He's thinking, I want to live a parasitic life. I want to extract resources or value from the other people who are working. I'm going to get those resources to achieve my end goals. So we could have two types of entry into the marketplace. So this is marked by conflict. Anytime there is a parasitic relationship, it is marked by conflict, violence, and dominance. I call it not a market symbiosis, but a political parasitism, because that's the politics is the foundation, is the groundwork that provides for these types of relationship to exist. Let's talk about market symbiosis. Is mutually beneficial relationship in which people cooperate for mutual gain. In a market, individuals and firms engage in voluntary exchange that lead to win-win outcomes. A market exchange, when you trade, it's not a win-lose. It's not one person wins at the expense. No, it's a win-win situation. Okay, poker, the game of poker is a zero-sum game. I lose $100, that means you won the $100. Plus 100 minus 100 is zero. But exchange trade is a positive sum game. It's a win-win situation. Okay. Think about the bees pollinating flowers while getting nectar, right? It's a symbiotic relationship. So most relationships in the human kingdom, animal kingdom, plant kingdom, most of our interactions are symbiotic. It's a win-win. We have so many types of these relationships over here between animals and plants with other plants, animals with other animals, humans with plants, etc. So all kinds of this symbiotic relationship is the dominant relationship. In this symbiotic relationship, we welcome competition and cooperation. Competition is not a bad thing, it's a great thing, right? We compete with one another. We produce better, higher quality goods and services. We provide the best of the goods and services that society desires. We could at the same time compete and cooperate. I call it co-petition, cooperative competition. For example, Samsung and iPhone, they cooperate, right? Sometimes they compete. Citibank, Wells Fargo, right? They compete for customers, but they cooperate when it comes to the ATM cards so that you can easily go to various banks and use the same card. That wasn't by design. It was market outcome that all the ATM cards have the same size, right? So they cooperated. USP is a cooperated outcome. So many firms, even they compete with one another, at the same time they cooperate in different circumstances. So the world is a cooperative world, and we welcome that. They complement one another. Okay, this is complementary. Spontaneous order emerges out of this symbiotic relationship. Again, I keep saying order emerges. So it takes time. We're going to define the order that emerges, okay? This is when I was talking about detangling the complexities of the invisible hand. So we're going to make it visible, and then we're going to see how order emerges. This order emerges as a result of individuals acting based on their own self-interest without the need of a central coordination. We don't need centralized coordination for order. Actually, centralized coordination leads to disorder, okay? Centralized authority is chaos. Anarchy is order. That's why it's called anarchic order. It's an order. It's a decentralized order. It's more stable, okay? So spontaneous order emerges as a result of individuals acting based on their own self-interest without the need of central coordination. This form of cooperation leads to this efficient allocation of resources, harmony, and peace. On the other hand, political parasitism involves the extraction of value from productive members of the society. That's political parasitism, right? I extract value from you and I redistribution. That's what it is. It's theft through taxation, regulation, redistribution. In a political parasitic system, the state relies on coercive power. These resources are often used inefficiently or redistributed in ways that benefits the or the unproductive, okay? So political parasitism. People are misled. They think somehow that there will be no voluntary wealth redistribution in the absence of the state. No, we are charitable. We care for one another. Charities existed before the state existed historically. People help one another. Again, cold flow, warm glow, overlapping of the genes. The biggest the private charity contributions is higher than government welfare programs and contributions, etc. Right? So people donate privately to people outside of their country, outside of their tribe, right? So this is something that there is a market for it, and we're going to start a market for philanthropy. That's coming up, pillar number 5. Okay, in 5 months, we're going to be talking about market philanthropy. The same way you go to the market, you buy apples and oranges, you're going to go to the philanthropy market and buy warm glow. I want to give you some money. In return, you have to give me a smile. Or I give you money just because the mere fact that you accept my donation, it gives you a tingling of your body, a sense of happiness, right? So there's a market for it. We don't need government intervention in this market because government intervention and distribution is not charity. It's coercion, it's theft, okay? It's not voluntary. We're looking at voluntary interactions. So the conclusion, the symbiotic relationships are the dominant norm in society. Most of our interactions are symbiotic. Every day you took the bus today, that was a symbiotic relationship. You got coffee, you bought your glasses, you got a pencil, you have a computer, you have a laptop, and you have shoes, etc. All these millions of symbiotic relationships took already place by the time you got to the classroom today. So that's the dominant, right? Specialization and exchange emerge as natural behavior in this framework. So in contrast, the conclusion is that political parasitism, in contrast, is coercive and involuntary. How did so if political society is coercive, political society is a violation of our human nature, right? Why did it emerge? Why did political society emerge? Is this a market failure, as David Friedman would say? Oh, this is a market failure. If the markets didn't fail, then why don't we have anarchy? If anarchy is the best system of organizing societal interactions, relationships, why don't we have anarchy? Why did the political society emerge? Well, the political society emerged out of a perceived fear. We have fear in ourselves. The problem is not the state, it's us. The tyrant is not the state. Each one of you is a tyrant in your head. You have to get rid of it. That's the paradigm shift I was talking about. You have to change yourself, okay? Because without us, there'll be no centralized authority. We have a perceived fear. We fear the state of nature, okay? We fear human nature. So the political society emerged out of a perceived fear of the state of nature, right? So what happens in the political society? We give away our freedoms for security. It's a trade-off. You want safety, you want security, give us your freedom. So, but they're not mutually exclusive. So the objective of this course is to show we can have both of them together. We shouldn't fear the state of nature. You shouldn't fear human nature, right? So we don't need this centralized authority to exchange fear to exchange safety and security for freedom. So the political society emerged from a perceived fear of the state of nature. The state of nature is defined as the human condition absent political government. Okay, so if there is no centralized authority, wow, we'll be at each other's throat, we'll be killing one another. So we want a centralized authority to provide security, and we're going to let go some of our freedoms. That's the fear that we are, that we have. Who started this fear? I mean, historically, in relatively modern times, it started with Thomas Hobbes, 1651. In his book, The Leviathan, he says that he characterized the state of nature. He said, in the state of nature, absent political centralized government, there'll be a war of every man against every other man. He said there'll be war all the time. He said will be a constant violent state of competition. People will be competing with one another. He said the existence is solitary, it is poor, it is nasty, it is brutish, and it is short. So Thomas Hobbes described the state of nature as being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish. Every man will be at each other's throat. Okay, that's how we describe it. Now, obviously, we don't agree with Thomas Hobbes. Maybe at that time, there was no division of labor. It was mostly agrarian society. So the depth of the division of labor was very limited. So if I'm doing the same thing and you're doing the same thing, there's no benefit for me to exchange. There's no specialization. We're both growing, all of us are growing potatoes. Then maybe I'm going to think, you know what? I'm going to come take over your land and take over your potatoes and your house and your goods and your apples and your, right? So this is an agrarian mindset where he didn't understand. Obviously, this is all 1651. He didn't understand the division of labor that will come about over time, in particular after the Industrial Revolution, right? 1760 to 1820, what we had was the Industrial Revolution that led to a deeper and deeper division of labor. And that's why I say it's the division of labor that binds us together. The deeper the division of labor, the more disparate our capabilities and our aptitudes, right? Then the more interconnected and interdependent we become, okay? So we shouldn't fear the state of nature anymore. The state of nature is characterized by harmony, unlike what Thomas Hobbes described in 1651. Unfortunately, most people still nowadays believe in the state of nature as being brutish and short and nasty and every man fighting every other man. So hopefully by the end of this course, you'll get that fear out of your heads. You realize that there will be harmony in the marketplace, and we have harmony. Everywhere there is harmony. Everywhere where you see there is disharmony, violence, you should find where the state is. It's the centralized authority that's committing these disharmonies and coercion. So now, out of this fear, several influential philosophers developed what we call social contract theories. What is the social contract theory? Right? The social contract theory is I give you my freedoms and you give me security. Right? I have to abide by your terms. You're the ruler. I will obey you, but at least you give me security. We gave all our freedoms and we got violence from the state. We gave our freedoms, we got violence from centralized authority. We never got peace. All the wars are statist phenomena. It's not like us neighborhoods going and waging wars around the world. It's statism, it's centralized authority that wages war. Most people don't want war. It doesn't benefit us. It benefits the centralized authority. Their clout, their power grows, kings, they get more land, more gold for the kings and nobility. The average individual doesn't benefit from it. We would never wage wars as individuals, right? But it's the centralized authority. So we gave all our freedoms away, and they took more and more freedoms away, but we didn't in return get peace and harmony. So out of this fear, nevertheless, social contract theories emerged. The theories test that individuals voluntarily cede some rights and self-sovereignty to a higher authority, the political government, or what I call it, the Leviathan, right? This Leviathan, to obtain safety and security. Thomas Hobbes is a social contract theorist. Give away your freedom, you get safety. John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, John Stuart Mill, John Rawls, Ibn Robert Nozick, right? He's a minarchist, but we'll talk about minarchism and anarchism later on. So these are all the social contract theories, right, that emerged over time. And this is the dominant theory right now in the current world, okay? Because we have centralized authority everywhere in the world. And the first thing that comes to mind, what happens if there is no government? And people would say, oh, people will be killing one another, right? If there's no government, it's like, oh, we'll be at each other. No, there'll be market institutions. There'll be market institutions that provide safety and security. Further, we will realize that, taking over your property, it's a myopic, short-sighted gain at the expense of a long-term benefit that I get by interacting with you. By specializing and trading, I benefit more than coming and taking over your, house or your land or your car. It's not beneficial. This central argument is that centralized government is superior to decentralized social order, and their work forms the foundation for much of modern political theories nowadays dominated by social contract theories. These philosophers have argued in favor of a state, viewing it as a necessary institution for securing individual rights, promoting justice, peace, and maintaining order. Okay. So, in contrast to these social contract theories, there are some philosophers who cautioned us. They said, wait a minute, why are we giving up our self-sovereignty, our freedoms, and in return, we're getting nothing. We're getting more violence, okay? One of these people was Friedrich Hayek. He's an Austrian economist. He won the Nobel Prize. He wrote a book, In the Road to Serfdom. He said statism is a road. It's when you give up your sovereignty, your freedoms, you're moving towards serfdom, right? He warns us against the dangers of central planning. So now we're seeing opposition to centralized authority. He said, we don't want centralized. There are dangers to centralized planning. He cautions about excessive state intervention in economic and social affairs. Said they're expanding their realm, right? They're intervening in the labor market, in the money market, in the housing market, in the food market, in the jurisprudence market, right? So they're intervening more and more. The scope and the size of governments have increased over time. Wagner's law states that as the size of the GDP is growing, the size of government expenditure as a percent of GDP is growing at a faster rate. Okay, the size and the scope of government as GDP is increasing, they're growing at a faster rate than the rise of the GDP. So they're getting larger, bigger, and stronger, more interventionism. Okay, he predicts that a powerful state may lead to loss of individual freedoms, and that's what is happening. Okay, the dangers of central planning. Hayek was a minarchist. What is minarchism? Minarchism is a view that centralized authority should only provide security. Think about Hayek was a minarchist. What is a minarchist? A minarchist is not an anarchist. A minarchist, the view is that governments should provide two services, which is safety, security. Think about the police or the army, right? Provide safety and security, and enforcement of contracts via its security forces, and arbitration and mediation, jurisprudence. Those are the two services. We shouldn't have government intervention in the labor market, in the education market, in the market for apples and oranges, right? No, or the provision of safety and security or safety of drugs, the FDA. We don't want the EPA. We don't want. So we only want security, police, and arbitration, mediation, the court system. Those are the two services. Those people are called a minarchist. An anarchist says we don't want government intervention at all. The market could provide those services. There is nothing unique about the provision of jurisprudence, right? We can have private judges. We can have private security. So those are topics that we're going to talk about, I believe, in pillar number 5, maybe towards the end of the course. So Rothbard is an anarchist. He advocated for complete elimination of the state. He said everything that we might think the state provides, the market provides more safely, more securely, more efficiently. Okay, so he was in favor of a decentralized social order, and we're going to talk more about this social order later on. This is the end. This was a short lecture. Any questions? Let's take some questions.
Questions?
Yes.
So earlier we were speaking about individual subjective preferences. So, okay, I'm not buying off on macroeconomics, but if you're, let's say, in the food business, and you do market analytics, you have a store, Whole Foods, and you say, okay, 14% of people are buying tomatoes. 15% of people are buying, or 15% of sales is bananas. 16% is onions. 18% is potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
So you get an idea how to maximize your real estate.
Yes.
And of course, maybe 50% of people are buying milk and eggs. So I'll put that in the back. So is that not macroeconomic?
It's business. It's business management. It's profit optimization. Economics is beyond. I mean, business is a subcategory, subsection of economics. Yeah, if you want to maximize business, you want to know what the aggregate preference is, right? So how do we know the aggregate preference that people prefer apples over oranges, for example, in the fruit market? So you're saying you want aggregates, right? So you have to know. But how do you find out that aggregates? That's what I'm saying. How do you discover that aggregate? You discover it only privately at the moment of exchange. So the mechanism that aggregates preferences is a market mechanism, which is called the price mechanism, the price system. Because when his preferences changes over time, how do I know? If you're selling tomatoes, right? His preferences is changing, he wants more tomatoes. How would you discover that? How would you? He's not going to call you.
Purchases.
When he goes to the market, he purchases. He's voting for. It's a market democracy. He's voting for more tomatoes. So you get the signal. You don't know who he is. You don't know where he is. You might dislike him. That's why I said the catalaxy brings harmony and peace. This is the detangling of the invisible hand that creates harmony. You don't know one another. You might dislike one another. But when he's buying tomatoes, he's signaling to you anywhere in the world on planet Earth that there is more demand for tomatoes. When the price goes up, it's a signal. Okay. At the same time, imagine there is a drought in your Oxnard tomato fields, right? How does he know there is a drought? You're not going to call it. Prices starts going up. When price goes up, he gets a signal, and he says, "Wow, let me utilize my tomatoes in the most efficient way," or start finding alternatives to tomatoes, some other fruits, some other plants, right? So the inner workings of this could not be aggregated by a bureaucrat. I'm not against aggregation I'm against aggregation, bureaucratic aggregation, or centralized authority, socialism, right? Dictated, oh, like this many units of Lada should be produced, this many units of education should be produced, or the doctors for a surgery could charge, $1,000, or a tooth implant is 300. So the prices are fixed in a centralized authority. Then there is no signaling mechanism what society prefers. You want your preferences to manifest itself in the marketplace, right? How do you share with the world that I like apples? It's like, I want to go on the top of the building, I want to scream, I love apples. How do I do it? Just go and buy apples. Your preferences manifest itself in the marketplace via the price mechanism. And that action is an individual action, it's not a collective action. So when preferences are aggregated, then that's fine. That's not what macroeconomics is. Macroeconomics is the gathering of data, and macroeconomics is the assumptions is that this aggregation is taking place where you're aggregating individual utilities arbitrarily, right, without you actually knowing what those utilities are, and imposing policies that satisfy the most number of people, which is utilitarianism we talked about, right? So aggregation that takes place in the marketplace, we welcome it. Of course, we need aggregation in the market-generated aggregation, not bureaucratic aggregation.
So how does that bureaucratic aggregation produce deficiencies like
Because it doesn't reflect the preference of individuals. Because the bureaucrat doesn't know. We are dynamic, we are adaptive, we live. So my preferences could change just because of the passage of time. I prefer green apples. I go to sleep, I wake up just because time passed, nothing else. I could wake up tomorrow and my preferences has changed from red apples to green apples. You will never be able to discover that as a bureaucrat. Socialism, right? That's why
they don't know that their finger is not on the pulse.
the finger is,
Suddenly you have a deficit.
you have surplus. And so sometimes, when I visited Soviet Armenia, so I walk into the market, there's a surplus of ice cream, and then the next market there's a shortage of milk. There's a surplus of skateboards, and there's a shortage of bicycles. The bureaucrats don't know human preferences. They thought they can sit and engineer the economy in such a way, oh, this year we're going to produce 100 units of bicycle, 300 units of motorcycles, 500 units of housing, 300 units of education, etc., etc. And there is always either a shortage or a surplus. They can never get it right because there is no computer, there is no mechanism, there is no possibility in the world that could generate, that could aggregate individual human preferences except in a free market economy via the price mechanism. That's the only way. It's a genius. It's like a supercomputer. Computers couldn't aggregate those preferences. That's why we want free markets, prices determined by supply and demand rather than arbitrary interventions, right? I mean, even minimum wages is an arbitrary intervention on the price of labor. Rent control is an arbitrary intervention on the price of rent. Property rental, right? So there's all kinds of interventions. They put quotas, right? They put price floors, price ceilings on the prices. They subsidize education, right? So these are all interventions that distort the price. Once prices are distorted, then the whole things fall apart. Then we have shortages and surpluses. That's what we observe in a social, they call it the loss of calculations in a socialist commonwealth. Ludwig von Mises talked about in his book the misallocation of resources, right? Because we're producing more apples, but people don't want apples. We're producing less bananas, but people want less bananas. So resources, capital, labor, and land are being misallocated for goods and services that society may not desire. Okay, so only in the free market we can obtain that information. We have 5 minutes left. Maybe one more question. Yes.
I have a question.
Oh.
I have a question.
I'm going to put you on the screen.
All right. You were talking about preferring deductive methodology versus inductive.
Yes.
I would like to know a little bit more. Why is this so? And where is inductive reasoning more beneficial to apply and where deductive should be applied? Like, why should we use one and the other? Why? How are they each better in
Okay.
different circumstances? Thank you.
Okay. It's a very great question. I'm going to keep it short because pillar number 2, we're going to spend the whole pillar number 2 on methodology, but I'll give you a preview. So economics is a deductive science, okay? Because economic principles are axiomatic. Let me give you an example. Think about the law of demand, right? What is the law of demand? The law of demand states what? That if the price of a good goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Price of a good goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Now, which methodology should we use to obtain that principle? So the inductive methodology, it is a methodology where we observe, we hypothesize, and then we test. I need to go to the supermarket, raise the prices, and sit down in the corner and observe that people are buying less apple. Do you need to do that? That's the inductive methodology. No, you don't. I know it beforehand, even if you close my eyes, if I know human nature and the state of nature, right? These are given to me. That's the scarcities of life. I know that if the price of a good goes up, if I have $100 and apples are $1, I'm purchasing 100 apples. If the price of apple doubles, how many apples can I buy? 50, because the price went up. Number one, that's called the income effect. So relative to the price of apple, my income is going down. So I can purchase less apples. And number two, again, it's a duality. Number two, there are substitutes. So there is the income effect and the substitution effect. They work in unison, right? For me to reduce my consumption of apples and purchase more bananas, right? Because then I can buy, watermelon, I can buy oranges, I can buy other fruits. So therefore, the income effect and the substitution effect leads to a reduction in the quantity of apples demanded in the marketplace. That's deductive thinking. I don't need to go to the supermarket and observe that the price is going up, that people are consuming less, okay? Actually, economics is not an inductive science at all. It's the wrong methodology. And in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about a little bit about why did methodology become the dominant methodology, okay? Let me give you just quickly, maybe we have a minute left, another example. Take minimum wages. Minimum wage is the price of labor. If the price of labor goes up, what happens quantity demanded for labor? Goes down. So minimum wages goes up, quantity demand for labor goes down. That creates what in the marketplace? Quantity of labor going down in the labor market, we call unemployment. There's unemployment, right? So minimum wages go up, unemployment goes up. Now, is this deductive or inductive? Do I actually need to go to the market and in the classroom and then you all work for me and the government says, I'm going to raise your wages? Well, if I have $100, there is 10 of you, I was paying $10 each, that's my expenditure. If your wages go up, what am I going to do? Lay off some workers. That's the income effect vis-a-vis the rise in your wages. And number two, I'm going to substitute, maybe with automation, robots, right? So the income effect and the substitution effect leads me to do what? Employ less. So this is a deductive science. I don't need to observe. Unfortunately, mainstream economists, 99%, 100% mainstream economists, they actually approach this as an inductive science. They actually go gather data in a city in Detroit and they say, oh, look, minimum wages went up in Detroit, but employment also went up. How is that possible? Well, because they couldn't hold everything else constant. Maybe other companies are moving from other states to Detroit, so they're employing more. That doesn't defy the law of demand in the labor market, right? It's just because more firms are demanding more. But the law is axiomatic. The law is true any place, any time. It's a tautological. It's true on planet Mars, planet Moon, right? As long as we know human nature and the state of nature, that law is always valid. That's what economics is a deductive science. Unfortunately, it was penetrated, with Herbert Hoover, 1931, 32, 33, right? At the turn of the 20th century, they wanted these politicians, bureaucrats, policymakers, they wanted to engineer the economy. In order to engineer the economy, you have to turn it into an inductive science. So you can aggregate. That's where macroeconomics was born in 1936. There should never be in macroeconomics. It shouldn't exist. Macro is not, it should be delegated to the political science department, or it should be a bureaucratic management department. There's nothing macro about economics. Economics is the study of individual human action in the state of nature. Okay, so I'm going to stop. Is that a good answer, or do you have any other questions?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, Gustavo, where are you from? Where are you joining us from?
I am living in the US, in Arkansas, but I am from Bolivia.
Bolivia?
Yeah, I don't know if you're in the graph you showed, if it's like people living in the United States or from that country, but I am Bolivian. Yeah.
Okay, nice meeting you, Gustavo. Thank you for the question. We're going to talk more about methodology next pillar. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Thank
Okay,
you.
so let's take a break, 5 minutes break.